And this evening we're going to be doing a sort of joint chapter session. We didn't look at job analysis last time around, but I'm glad that we didn't because it ties in very nicely with recruitment, which is the work we are doing for this week. And make sure I click on the right thing. That is always helpful. There we go. So it's contact session 4. We're in academic week 8. Can you believe that? We are very quickly going through this year. So that's quite crazy. But yeah, so essentially what I would like to look at tonight is a couple of concepts which are important. And what I would love for you guys to do is in the discussion forums that we've got to give your input on these things. Obviously, I will upload these lecture notes to the YouTube channel, and you can comment there, or you can comment on the discussion forums, because I would love for your input with regards to this as well. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you guys was job analysis and why you believe that job analysis is important, and why there might be certain challenges with regards to job analysis. So when we're looking at job analysis, we obviously looking at the tasks and duties and responsibilities that a job has. And when we are looking at that, it's important to be very accurate with regards to the tasks, duties, and responsibilities attached to the job. Because part of the reason why we analyze a job, there are a couple of reasons, but part of it is, amongst other things, to be able to recruit people. Because to recruit people, you need a job ad. So this is kind of how that ties into the next chapter, chapter 6. You can't have a job ad if you don't know what the job entails. So how are you going to get people? And the entire idea of recruitment is that you get the right person for the job. And you can't do that if you are sending out the wrong message as to what the job entails. So that's part of the reason why obviously that is quite important. And then also tied to that is also job evaluation. If you don't know what a person is supposed to do on a daily basis, how do you evaluate them? Saplan says you can't. Or you can evaluate them, but you can't evaluate them fairly. And that's another important thing to have a look at, is the fairness of all of this. Because we're living in a country that's got very clear labor legislation and very clear legislation. I mean, we've got the Constitution first and foremost, on which every single law in the country is based on. And the Constitution says you're not allowed to unfairly discriminate against somebody. The Employment Equity Act says exactly the same. And the Labor Relations Act has got provisions in it for people that are unfairly discriminated against. So we're talking about evaluating people in a fair manner so that they are given the exact same chance, the exact same opportunity that people working with them are given. That we use the same criteria to evaluate each person, so that one person isn't potentially scored more positively than somebody else, or alternatively more negatively than somebody else. That everybody is evaluated at the same level and using the same criteria. So the challenge here is, when you are analyzing a job, how do you go about doing it? There's a million different ways that you can go about doing it, but you will need to find a way that is the most accurate in order to get the job done. And there's a bunch of dangers attached here. If you don't know the field and you're analyzing a job, certain things might seem insignificant to you, but if you're actually working in the field, you realize, oh, it's actually not insignificant. It's actually quite important. Or certain things that you might not understand, why certain things are being done, or how certain things are supposed to be done. So lack of understanding of the field of the job that you're evaluating is potentially problematic. And you also need to understand that if you're working in an HR environment, you can be anywhere. You can be in pharmaceuticals, you can be in a medical environment at a hospital, you can be working in an IT firm, you can be working at a bank, financial institution. The options are endless. And you trained in HR, you're not trained in IT necessarily, you're not necessarily trained in medical procedures. So if you having to come up with a job analysis of a nurse, you haven't got nursing necessarily. Yes, some people do, admittedly, but you don't necessarily have the knowledge of what a nurse is supposed to do. So you will need to go and figure out what is the best way I can go in and figure out what a nurse does, or the senior matron or whoever. What do they do? What is their job? Um, and as I said before, accuracy here is important for not just evaluation purposes, but also for recruitment purposes if you have to advertise a job in that specific field. And challenges, as I said, aside from the fact that you might not be familiar with the field, if you are evaluating people and you decide to do a on-the-job analysis where you are basically shadowing the person, you have to try not to get in the way. People might pretend to do more than they normally do because they might be afraid that it might look as if they are normally slacking off. People might do things differently to how they normally would do it. So you think that a job is being done in a certain way, but that's not actually how you normally do it. Or people might just freeze up completely because they're now being observed. They might not give you full information or be forthcoming with information because they're not comfortable, or they're worried and that's why they're uncomfortable in terms of sharing information. They might not trust you. They might think there's ulterior motives or whatever. Also understanding that in certain jobs, you might have a very standard day for like 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden week 4, something out of the ordinary happens, and now you have to deal with it. And that wasn't actually, you were not necessarily there, or people forget about it. So you have these outliers in certain jobs sometimes that occur. So if you're at a financial institution and you work there and you work in IT, your standard day's job might be designing the website, and making sure the website works, and doing training for the people working there. But then if there's an attack on the bank, if they, for instance, have a cyber attack on the database, or the website or something, all of a sudden now your job changes a bit because you have to address that and security risk, and there's now reports that must be filled in and people that must be contacted, and like I said, some of these occurrences occur once in 10, 20 years. It's still part of the job, but it's not necessarily going to be picked up in the analysis for the plain and simple reason that it almost never occurs. So those are little small challenges that we can potentially think of, and I would love to see what your thoughts are in terms of challenges that you perceive with regards to analysis, and why you believe that job analysis is important. Right. So one of the things that I did want to look at, yep, so my mouse decided to do some work of its own. One of the things that I noticed in your chapter 5 that my perception is that it can create a little bit of confusion is the table on page 171, table 5.1, the hierarchy of work activities. And please, if there's a specific section that I'm basically covering things I think that you might potentially have a little bit of difficulty with in terms of understanding, or concepts that are very closely linked together that you might confuse. If there's anything else, please, in the discussion forums, drop me an email, let me know. I can put up a small little video for you guys on that, and we can have a little bit of a discussion. So for the table, what I decided to do was to actually take 2 different examples and give you those examples, and hopefully that serves to clarify the concepts a bit. Because especially when we come to occupation or job or position, those terms sometimes tend to be used quite interchangeably, especially job and position. So there is actually minute differences with regards to them. And your textbook gives explanations of these concepts, but I wanted to give examples because I think that might go over a bit better in terms of helping you understand the differences. And if it doesn't, please by all means let me know, and I can um, put up a bit more content that can assist you with this. But I chose the job family of HR firstly. That's something that, well, you're busy studying it, so there might be some familiarity there. And in terms of occupation, you can see they've got like HR specialist. So that's basically an umbrella term that covers a whole bunch of jobs that are related to that. So if we talk about HR specialists, as HR person, you can specialize in a whole bunch of things. So you can be a recruitment specialist. I'm a training and development specialist. You can be a payroll specialist. Um, you've got your people that specialize in evaluations. So your guys that do your psychometric testing, that sort of thing. All of those are specialist areas. So the HR specialist is kind of a blanket term for all the jobs that fall under that. So I've given you an example here of a job that will fall under HR specialist, and that would be a recruitment specialist. And then a position related to recruitment specialist would be your senior recruitment specialist. And usually what you see here is there's some sort of hierarchy in terms of the specific job. So you will have a junior recruitment specialist, a senior recruitment specialist, head recruitment specialist, something like that, that could potentially be there. So that's kind of how those two relate to each other in terms of the relationship between a position and a job. And then duties, that's actually what the person is supposed to do. So it's a generic description of what the situation entails. Also like a bit of a blanket phrase or word that covers a whole bunch of different tasks and elements. So if we talk about duties, one of the duties of a senior recruitment specialist would be to recruit suitable candidates for a specific position. And then what that means is, or one of the tasks related to that, in order to recruit suitable candidates, you would need to screen the CVs of the people that apply for the job. And in order to get the CVs, you might need to use the internal recruitment software in order to get the people to upload their CVs. So to give you a bit of an example, a lot of these companies, and I think I've got a little thing up here that pulls the Mickey out of that a bit later, but you tend to go to a website and then you fill in your entire pedigree, and you have to attach an ID, copy of your ID and copy of your certifications and your degree certificates and all of that stuff. And in addition to that, you also have to attach your CV, which is a bit weird, because they literally ask you everything that's on your CV. They ask in this form, they ask on this form, but then you still have to submit your CV. And then what actually ends up happening is that the system has to be set up to filter out unwanted candidates, if I can put it that way. So as a recruitment specialist, part of your job might actually entail, or senior recruitment specialist, or whoever they get to do the job, they might actually get that person to set up the system and configure the system so that it blocks out any candidates that don't meet the minimum requirements. And these days, a lot of that's actually done by AI, which is kind of scary. So you basically have to tell the AI what you want and what you don't want. And once that's done, the system will kick out everybody that's not necessary and everybody that doesn't meet the criteria, or whatever criteria you decided to exclude from the process. And then you are left with a batch of people, and you as the recruitment specialist will then screen it. So to give you an example, you know, UNISA, to use them as an example, they've got a system like this where you fill in everything, attach your CV, all the documents and so forth. And then the system, we actually spoke to the guy that was involved there, and he said to us they got something like 33,000 applicants. The system tossed out 22,000 applicants because they didn't fully complete the forms, or because certain items were missing, so they didn't attach their CV, or they didn't attach an ID document, or whatever the case might be. They're not suitably qualified. And then they scanned through the resumes, and then they whittled the 11,000 down to, I think, 350 or something, that they then put through for final training. So that would be an example of what a recruitment specialist does. And also how we these days use certain tools to assist us in our jobs as HR people. I mean, 11,000 is still a heck of a lot. It's a large number, but it's a lot better than 33,000. So yeah, hopefully that's an example that makes some sense to you. And then I also added another example from the IT field. So your job family would be information technology. Occupation would be a software developer. And one of the jobs attached to software development would be front-end development. We've also got a back-end development, those things. So all of that falls under software developer. We've got a front-end developer, that's a job. And then, as I said, kind of blanket term hierarchy sort of setup. You've got your junior front-end developer, your senior front-end developer, your lead front-end developer. And then I left out tasks, duties, and elements, but basically with a duty here of a junior front-end developer would be to develop the front end of a HR system. And a task attached to this would be to actually go and create a screen for personnel contact details. And an element of this job would be to use a suitable software program to actually create this page where the personnel information can be captured, where the personnel information can be viewed. Right. Hope that makes sense. If you are still confused, please let me know in the discussion forum, and we can add some more examples, some more discussion on that. Right, so job description versus job specification, that's another term that I thought might cause some confusion. So I've created this little table for you guys where I'm contrasting the two things. So when we talk about a job description versus a job specification, with the job description, we're talking about the job itself, but with the job specification, we're talking about the person doing the job. Job description, we look at tasks attached to the job. Job specification, skills that the person doing the job needs, as well as knowledge and abilities that this person needs. They call it SKA, SCAR, as an abbreviation, I've noticed. But basically, like I said, job specification is about the person itself, whereas job description is about the actual job, the inanimate aspect of the whole thing, and the tasks, responsibilities, and duties attached to that. Right. And then just job analysis, and we've covered this briefly before, actually in a bit more detail. Job analysis allows us to come up with a job description, which we can then use for recruitment and evaluation. And a job specification, we can use to assign duties, responsibilities, to actually identify certain jobs and to come up with job summaries. And again, all of these things are very handy with regards to recruitment and things that we need in recruitment. If we talk about job specification, because I need to be able to say, this is what your key performance indicators, that's another term that we often use. So those are the things we expect you to be able to do, the things we expect you to do in the job. And also allows us to, as I say, know what the person, what skills they need, what specific qualifications they might need, if there's professional registration that you're required to have. For instance, if you work in any medical field, usually you're required to be registered with the Health Professions Council of South Africa. Otherwise, you just can't do certain jobs. You're not allowed to legally. So those are all things that contribute to recruitment and being able to effectively recruit and put out job ads. Now, one of the the big things that's always a bit of a joke, and something that you need to definitely consider when you are conducting job analysis and you're trying to think about skills and knowledge and abilities that people need for the job. Very often, if you look at entry-level jobs, it's an entry-level job with an entry-level salary. But if you look at what they expect the person to be able to do, you go, "Well, look, I was only able to do that after having done the job for 5 years." Well, how can you expect a person that is literally just coming out of university or just coming out of matric or whatever, how can you possibly expect them to be able to do these things and know these things? So that's one of the big frustrations, and it's a running joke absolutely everywhere. And something that I think as HR professionals we definitely need to look at is that expectation versus reality. People, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, at some point you need to bring in somebody that hasn't necessarily got the knowledge or the skills or the expertise. And that's also where the Employment Equity Act comes in, where they talk about the potential to be able to do the job. So is this person that I'm interviewing, are they trainable? Do they have a good attitude? Do they have a good work ethic? Because if they do, what is the likelihood of you actually being able to teach the person the skills, to mentor the person, to guide the person so that they are able to do the job? So I think that's something that I would like you to think about in terms of job analysis and what we specify in our adverts for jobs, on our vacancies, um, that gets posted. Just kind of think on that and what we expect people to have versus what the job actually entails, and what we are actually realistically expecting when it's not realistic. So that brings us to the recruitment aspect, so chapter 6, learning unit 6. And my question to you is, why do we recruit people? And there are a bunch of different reasons why, and I again would love to see your input on this on the discussion forum. But the most obvious answer is that we've got a job that needs filling. So the question is, why is that job needing to be filled? Are we a new company that's starting and we need to staff that company? Are we an existing company that's expanding? Did somebody resign? Did somebody unfortunately pass away and now their job is open? Are we expanding the business and now we need more people? Are we branching out to different cities or different towns and now we need more people for those places? Why are we recruiting? And the why also kind of ties in with where we recruit. And if you look at your textbook, the whole internal recruitment versus external recruitment debate, sometimes you want to bring in people that have fresh ideas and haven't been around for a while. Because you tend to, if you have been at certain places for a while, if you're not very careful, you kind of get so encultured in the organizational culture that you just can't, it almost becomes a groupthink is something I think that you guys should hopefully be familiar with. If not, give me a shout. But you start thinking like everybody else there. So there's no real or very limited new thinking coming in unless people are very disciplined about it. So internal recruitment, though, you know what you're getting because the person has worked there and the person is familiar with the company and can get started and get stuck in very, very quickly. That's obviously one of the advantages, which is the other thing I would like you to think about, the advantages versus disadvantages of internal recruitment and the advantages versus disadvantages for external recruitment. The problem is if you are in an environment where you are wanting to be innovative, might actually be a good idea to go and look elsewhere, to go look outside your company and recruit from there and see who you come up with, because they might bring in fresh ideas, because everybody's so, as I said, encultured in this is how we do things, that you might actually, to avoid stagnation as an organization, want to bring in fresh ideas, which usually comes in the form of somebody from externally. So just a bit of food for thought there. So yeah, reasons for recruitment vary, and your job advertisement obviously will need to consider that to a certain degree as well. Your recruitment process and so forth and so forth. So the one thing that I found quite, I don't want to say amusing, in your textbook, but they talk about various ways of and sources for recruitment and finding people. Print media, I don't know where you live, but where I live, like the newspapers are like shutting down left, right, and center. So you used to have like a variety of daily newspapers, and you would look through those, and they would have job ads and all that. And well, that number of newspapers has dwindled substantially. I know a number of the weekend publications have shut down. So and I remember distinctly that over the weekend, the weekend papers used to have a ton of job ads as part of the newspaper, and now that newspapers are, like I said, seeming to become slightly more extinct, the print paper anyway, um, that becomes problematic if you are relying on that as a source, especially as a job hunter, if you're looking at that. And as a recruiter, it's something you also need to consider. That would it be worth my while to actually place an ad in the paper and have people look through the paper there? I mean, these days, it's kind of scary to see how many jobs are being advertised on a place like LinkedIn. LinkedIn is sort of like really led the charge in terms of electronic recruitment and online recruitment. Also because it's very easy for a recruiter to send a message to somebody on LinkedIn. You can do a quick search to see people that meet your criteria, because remember, LinkedIn is basically a professional version of Facebook, or supposed to be. So you've got your job experience and your CV and all of that you've got on there, your pedigree, your knowledge, skills, all those things, or your experience. And people, recruiters, can go and sift through that and search through that and find some candidates. And I know a lot of people that were headhunted via LinkedIn. You just send them a message and say, listen, I'm so and so, I work for that company, we are looking for somebody that matches your skills, would you be interested in joining us for an interview? And the other thing these days is we're not just looking at people physically going to offices for interviews. These days, remote working is a thing. A lot of people do work for overseas companies. A lot of people do work for companies in Joburg, but they stay in Cape Town or um, somewhere else. And they just, as long as they can log in remotely, it's fine, as long as the job gets done. So we're looking at a completely different landscape to the landscape that we were looking at 10 years ago, 15 years ago, definitely 30 years ago, in terms of where people are able to see ads. So yeah, LinkedIn, you've got a ton of job sites. You've still got your good old fashioned recruitment agencies that you can physically go to. I see that's always very popular with matriculants. Once the matric results have come out, you usually, here where I live in Gqeberha, you usually see long queues outside the recruitment agents' offices with kids standing around with folders and envelopes and waiting to talk to the recruitment specialist to try and find some sort of job, or just get themselves noticed so that somebody else can dig for them, or put themselves on the map, if I can put it that way. So there are different places that you can find these people. Word of mouth. Very frequently I see that people will ask, listen, I need somebody to do this and this. Do you by any chance know anybody? And pros and cons attached to that as well. The question is, how well do you trust that person to give you a reference for somebody that is able to do the job and will do the job well. I think we all have horror stories of people asking for recommendations for car mechanics, or um, for schools, or uh, restaurants, painters, you name it. And then the job didn't turn out quite the way that you wanted to turn out. So pros and cons attached to that as well. So also a bit of food for thought there. Where do you find your recruits? And here also just one last thing that I also want you to consider is the degree of expertise. The more qualified the person is required to be, the more experienced the person is required to be, the more specialized the person is required to be, the more difficult your search is going to be, and the more competition you're going to have in terms of competitive, or competitors rather, in terms of salary and poaching and all that. So also just kind of bear that in mind. If you're looking at a highly specialized job, I know Rhodes University, statistics, I know at one point they were advertising statistics posts, lecturers, and they actually offered a special incentive. So there's like an expert, I call it levy, what do they call it? Expert bonus amount per month that you get paid for working in an academic department if you're in stats. And that's because you're probably going to be earning more in industry. So in order to try and lure people that have the expertise and have the skills, they give them this little bonus. They get paid a bit more than your normal lecturer, in order to try and encourage them to rather come to a university environment. So yeah, your competition with regards to that becomes quite fierce in terms of the employer there not being in the pound seat and the employee being in the pound seat, because there are maybe quite a few jobs available, but not a lot of people that can fill the job. Whereas if you're on the lower end of the spectrum in terms of skills and all that, not a lot of jobs, not a lot of yeah, not a lot of jobs, but a lot of people that are competing for that job. So yeah, also more food for thought. South African context, as I said, we've got a whole bunch of challenges with regards to filling posts. We need to look at the goals of our organization, and when we are looking at these goals, based on that, design jobs so that we have jobs in existence that fulfill the organizational goals and objectives. We need to look at what the criteria is for a person to be successful, considered successful in their job. What should the person, what boxes should they tick? What should they do for them to actually be an outstanding employee? And then once we've got this, we can, or that's based rather on your job description and your job specification. And all of that is needed to basically form our recruitment effort and inform our recruitment effort, how we go about recruiting people. Because if we know what the goals of the organization is, we know what the job entails, we know what the success criteria is for a job, and um, the skills needed, the knowledge needed, the abilities needed, all of that, then we can target our recruitment effort to find the people. And we can also target our selection methods to find the relevant people. So you need to decide, are we going to do testing on people? Are we going to do interviews? All of the above? Are we going to give them case studies that they must complete? Are we going to be doing multiple interviews with people? I know for lecturing jobs, for instance, you'll sit down and chat to people, and then the other thing you definitely have to do is you have to get up in front of a bunch of people and lecture something. You have to present a lecture, which is, I don't want to say common sense. Common sense can be problematic, but you need to know that a person can look fantastic on paper, but they might not be able to convey meaning and be able to relate to students. So you'll have that aspect. Same with doctors. I mean, doctors basically the entire internship year is a whole test in terms of, do you have the competencies in order to actually be able to do this job. So yeah, and then the challenges we've got with regards to this in terms of finding people that meet these needs and these goals and all of that. So again, one of the key challenges, especially if we're recruiting newbies coming in, is you're sitting with people that might not have any job experience. So the skill set that they bring might be very theoretical. So your question in terms of, if I can quickly go back here, your selection methods, you'll need to consider that when you are selecting people. And also just a note on this is when I talk about organizational goals and objectives, you also need to look at the organizational culture, because that's another little key thing that pops up a lot, is does the person fit in with the culture? Will you be able to fit in with your teammates? Because if you hire somebody that's toxic, do not think for one second that that person is going to be influenced by the people around them and become less toxic. The research shows that the opposite happens. A toxic person turns everybody else toxic systematically. So just also a little bit of a note on that. If you're looking for somebody, if you bring in somebody new, look at somebody that's trainable, look at somebody that's got a good work ethic, good attitude. Not necessarily the smartest. What I've also noticed and observed over time is the person who's the smartest person in the room and looks the best on paper might not necessarily interview the best or come across the best, or you interview the person and you go, I don't want to hire this person. But the person that doesn't look so good on paper, now all of a sudden when you interview them, you go, but listen, I like this person, one, and I can work with this person, and this person actually, there's something about them. There's something that makes me feel this person can work with us. So also a bit of food for thought. It's not just necessarily what's on paper. You kind of need to look beyond that. So the challenge is amongst other things, how do you look beyond that and not just stare at a piece of paper and go, oh, okay, yeah, no. And also another debate, like how often do we kick out people because on paper they don't look good, but then in reality they actually would have been the best fit for the organization. Okay, so then the big kahuna, medical or other testing for jobs. One thing that I've noticed, a new trend that's popping up now, and this is partly thanks to COVID still, is that a lot of companies are actually bringing in testing again, because there was a lot of things that happened during COVID, and unfortunately because of that they don't necessarily trust that the people that have completed qualifications have the necessary skills and knowledge. So they've brought back a lot of testing. So, okay, you say you can use Excel, fantastic. I would please like an Excel spreadsheet that does this, this, and this. There you go. Merry Christmas, please. Thank you so much. And that's something to bear in mind. And people would complain, no, it's not fair. You're not allowed to do that. Yes, they are. They're very much allowed to do that. So testing is very much allowed, provided that it's done in a fair manner and you're not discriminating against anybody. If we talk about skills testing, then the other tests that cause quite a bit of a stir would be your psychometric testing. And here, the law actually does allow you to perform psychometric testing on a person, provided that it is done by a person that is suitably qualified. So you actually, as part of industrial and organizational psychology, you have a psychometrics module, and you qualify, so you know exactly how to, you're trained on how to administer the tests, one, and you are trained in how to interpret the tests. And tied to this is you must be registered with the Health Professions Council. So there is fine print with regards to who is allowed to conduct these testing. The unions are not always very fond of this, but the unions have also kind of agreed that as long as there's no bias in the test and it can be fairly administered to everybody, so it doesn't mean that because a person is English is their third language, they're not being discriminated against in the test because the test uses language that they don't understand. The unions, as long as that doesn't happen, unions are fine. As long as there isn't any other bias, unions are fine. As long as it's administered by a suitably qualified and registered person, it's fine. But if it's not done, that's when there's a problem. The other big kahuna is medical testing. Now here, you will need to prove inherent job requirement. So just kind of bear that in mind. Inherent job requirement is important here. So there's a lot of case law on this if you ever want to go and dig. A flight attendant that tested positive for HIV, one of the airlines said to him, look, you're not allowed to work as a flight attendant anymore because you tested positive for HIV. Courts found, sorry, but it's not an inherent job requirement. You can't, you're discriminating against that person for being HIV positive. There's no reason why the person can't still perform their duties as a flight attendant if they're HIV positive. Obvious things here would be things like eye tests, night work. If you're doing night work, there are certain conditions that get worse or present themselves at night. So in that instance, usually it's actually part of the BCA as well that you have the right to conduct certain medical tests on a yearly basis. Obviously to make sure the person, nothing suddenly creeps up and you didn't know about it. And then, like I said, if you're a driver or somebody like that, somebody that must or can potentially, operate something that if you aren't fully able to see properly, so if your visual acuity isn't 20/20, that could be a problem. So the eye tests would be a thing. Medical doctors need to recertify with regards to certain things, CPR and all those things on a regular basis. And obviously you're allowed to test them for that to see if they've got that competency. So there's a whole bunch of jobs where medical testing actually would be allowed. Airline pilots, you don't want somebody in the cockpit that is at major risk for heart attack or that sort of thing, because again, if you're flying a plane and you've got a couple of hundred people in your plane, you don't want the person to have a cardiac event or something similar. So again, if you're going to argue there that medical testing would be unlawful and unnecessary, you could argue from the employer's perspective, inherent job requirement. You are basically performing a job that if you were to have a medical emergency, you could potentially kill other people. So, or seriously injure other people. So because of that, medical testing for certain ailments would be a regular thing to make sure that everybody is safe. Okay, so that's basically the components of recruitment and job analysis, which I think could potentially cause a little bit of confusion. If there's anything that I did not cover, if there's anything that you feel you're still not 100% in terms of the explanation or understanding, if you want to add your own examples, that would be fantastic. We've got the discussion forums open for that. You have got my email address. Please use that. Please ask me any questions. Thank you to the people that have been doing that. I really do appreciate that. It's nice to interact with you. It's nice to see that you are interacting with the content. I know working full time and studying is a major challenge. I'm fully aware of that. And as I've said before, I have a heck of a lot of respect for the fact that you've made that decision and you've been brave enough to make that decision, and that you are pushing through with it. So big ups for that. So yeah. Ice task, as I said, have been loaded. You can sort of have a look at that. I'll also be adding a couple of more videos with regards to your POE, which brings me to my other little reminder that I would like to remind you of the POE section in the discussion forum, specifically per task. If you've got questions, if you're uncertain about anything, please ask. The discussion forum, reason why I've got that there instead of saying just email me, that way other people can benefit as well, because somebody else might have exactly the same question, but they might be concerned that they're missing something somewhere, or they might not have the time to ask, or whatever. And that way, if we've got it on the discussion forum, everybody can view it and go and see what the answer to the question was, and they might be able to, or might want to give their own input with regards to how to address the question, or um, tips or hints that they found in terms of answering the question as well. So yeah, so that is me for the evening. I wish you a good week further, and I hope that you have found this informative. And if there's anything, as I said before, that you are unsure about, anything you've got questions about, please ask. And then I will see you guys again in 2 weeks' time. Have a fabulous week, and good luck with everything else that's happening. And we'll chat soon. Take care.